So the verse that opens this week's Torah portion is called Vayechi. Has been with me truly all week. Vayechi Yaakov. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt for 17 years. And it says in Jacob's days, the years of his life were 7 years and 40 years and 100 years. Now, our rabbis are puzzled with this sentence, the way it is written. They are puzzled because in all other cases that the Torah accounts for the lifespan of our forefathers and our foremothers, the order of the accounting is reversed. It's the bigger number that is spelled out first, and decreasingly the other smaller numbers. So if it had been the case here, the Torah would have had the years of Jacob being 100 years and 40 years and 7 years. Why is it the opposite this time? There is no mistake in Torah, so the rabbis are going to try to figure out how to explain things away. Make sense of this seemingly awkward beginning for our Torah portion. One of the commentators that I found connects this verse in the Torah portion to another one just a few turns of the scroll before, where Jacob has just arrived in Egypt, and Joseph, his son, who had risen, if you remember, to second in command in Egypt, second only to Pharaoh, brings him to Pharaoh's court and introduces him to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh, as a nice guy that he was, asks, Jacob, how you doing? How's life? How's been your life so far? And Jacob peculiarly answers Pharaoh, and I quote, "Few and bad were the days of the years of my life." And so perhaps the commentator reading that statement from Jacob connects that to the enunciation of his years, starting with a smaller number. Maybe he's telling us that if you're going to look at your life this way, in such negative terms, then the Torah is going to account for that in the way it's going to spell out your years, starting with a smaller number. The truth of the matter is, contrary to what Jacob is obviously stating, there were many years in his life where Jacob was happy and alive. The rabbis are telling us, actually, we can read that in this first verse of the Torah portion. It says, Vayechi Yaakov, and Jacob lived in the land of Egypt for 17 years. That's kind of also an interesting choice of verb, because usually when one of our forefathers or foremothers come to set up tent in any kind of land, the verb that is used most often, overwhelmingly actually, is either the word dwelling, they came to dwell in the land, or they settled in the land. But here for Jacob, the word is, and Jacob lived. Vayechi Yaakov, and Jacob lived in the land of Egypt for 17 years. The Torah is telling us, according to the rabbis, Jacob was alive. He was happy for 17 years when he was in Egypt. He lived. So why? Why? What happened in Egypt for the 17 years that made Jacob so happy? Now, to answer this question, we need to turn to the more mystical reading of the Torah. We need to turn to Kabbalah, which I love to do. So it's not hardship. It comes naturally. And the Kabbalists are telling us, look at the word Vayechi, and he lived. The quintessential word here in our verse, Vayechi, the gematria of Vayechi, and if you don't know what the gematria is, the Kabbalists transform words in Hebrew into numbers. Each letter is assigned a number, and if you add all the letters together, you come up with a numerical value for that word. And the gematria for Vayechi is 34. So the Kabbalists are saying, okay, great. Vayechi, 34. Now we can account for 17 of the 34, the 17 years that Jacob was in the land of Egypt where he was alive. That's great, but it only accounts for half. Can we find somewhere else in the Torah, can we find someone else in the story, the unfolding saga of the life of Jacob, another place where specifically the Torah mentions something about 17? Then, 17 plus 17, we will have a full picture of Vayechi, of how alive Jacob was. It doesn't take long for the Kabbalists to look through the scroll this way and the scroll that way, and they go far back enough and they find in the story of Jacob the number 17 appearing early on. Joseph, you remember Joseph? Joseph was the one to introduce him to Pharaoh, but Joseph, his son, was his favorite son, if you remember. He's the son to whom Jacob gave the famous coat of many colors. And because of that coat, he was the son that all the brothers hated most and vowed to do him harm. And when Jacob was 17, that fateful day, Jacob had sent him to find his brothers who had left camp some days before with the flock, to go and find them and report back. Spy on them, kind of, and tell him what were they doing as they were watching the flock. And that fateful day that Jacob sends his 17-year-old son to find his brothers, that fateful time where Joseph, according to the report that the sons give Jacob, Joseph was killed by a wild beast in those fields. And the sons brought back to their father Jacob the blood-stained coat of many colors as proof of his son's death. Now we know that Jacob was not killed that day. They sold him into slavery. But Jacob didn't know that. And here we have our other 17, the 17 years from the birth of Joseph to his premature death, where the 17 years where Jacob was happy and alive. And now, the last 17 years of Jacob's life, when he meets again and lives again with his sons, Joseph, those are also 17 years of happiness, of aliveness for Jacob. 34 years of Vayechi that Jacob was alive. 34 years that he was spending with his son Joseph. Now it's problematic that you limit your happiness to being only in the presence of that one son in your life when you have 12 others, notwithstanding a couple wives and concubines and a whole clan to watch over. But that's a conversation for another time. Because despite all that, despite the fact that Jacob was happy these 34 meager years, he doesn't see it this way. And the way he describes his life is of short years made of awful, bad, terrible days. And perhaps that's why. Because Jacob is only able to see what's lacking, what's not there, what's unhappy. Perhaps that's why the Torah spells out his lifespan with a little number first, and not with a bigger one. Now this verse has been with me all week because I thought it was so perfect that this was the Torah portion that straddled between 2014 and 2015. Let alone that this is the last Torah portion of the book of Genesis. And for us too, it's about moving to another chapter, another book, in fact, in our lives. But it was fabulous. It was so powerful to have that story, this verse, to be there to guide me through this transition. And no, a lot of people and a lot of you here have wished me a better 2015 than 2014. And I really get it, and I really, really appreciate your well wishes for better health and and more joyful times. But I don't want to discard 2014 altogether either. I mean, if I'm honest with you and honest with myself, and I look back at this year that was, I had the most amazing 2014. Seriously. I mean, yes, I suffered some personal losses early in the year, and all of us as a community have also suffered great loss and went through some weeks of deep mourning. And each of us have also gone through some difficult times this past year. And yes, it is true. I don't want to deny it or ignore it. A few weeks ago, I had a heart attack, and I'm lucky to be here. But if I look at the year that was, I remember stepping into this year with a meditation retreat to ground us and center me to begin this 2014, just like we are going to do next weekend. And then I went personally on a 10-day meditation retreat, which was really a perfect day to go through January. And then together we beautifully and meaningfully celebrated one holiday after the other, Purim, Passover, high holidays. Not to forget my daughter's bat mitzvah in June. And this incredible ceremony that was one of the greatest moments in my entire life. And then I got to spend 3 weeks on the French Riviera in vacation with my family, so that was nice. It was warm, sunny, the food was delicious. This year I got to see my son, Lior, for the first time ride a bicycle. Just last week I saw my kids for the first time. I mean, Amaya was the second time and she was 5 last time. But for the first time almost, both of them learned to ski. They had never skied before. So I don't want to wake up 10 years from now, 15 years from now, and look at 2014 and 2014, oh, that was the year I had a heart attack. No! I don't want to be like Jacob, looking back at his life and saying, well, notwithstanding 34 years of joy and happiness, my days were sad and bad and long, short life. 147 years, short life. We can't take any of those days for granted. We can't. See, one of the things that there are obviously major things that happen during a time such as having a heart attack, but one of the things that happened because of that was that I got to really appreciate a song in our repertoire, a way I had never got before. I love when I suddenly have new favorite songs. And it's a very benign song. You know, one of those most meaningful songs that we don't realize how meaningful they are until we really stay with them, like row, row, row your boat. Right? Mine is narrow bridge. כל העולם כולו גשר צר מאוד, והעיקר לא לפחד כלל. The whole world, this whole existence is just a narrow bridge. Just a narrow bridge. And above all is not to fear at all. That's what the verse is saying. And it's powerful to me because, see, I used to think, I had this vision of my life as a narrow bridge. It started when I was born, and then it curved up this beautiful bridge-like shape, and then over there, in the time of my death, was the other side of the bridge. And all of life was just walking that narrow bridge. And that image is now shattered. Gone. I thought I was on the beautiful arch of the bridge of my life, 43. I was right there in the middle. I had gone 43, God willing, there was another 43. I could see the going down part of the bridge. It's okay. Ahead of me, and I was going to mindfully walk down that other side of my bridge. But after October 17, I realized that there is no other half of the bridge. All there is the bridge that is behind us and on which we stand, but in front of us is emptiness. There is no bridge. That's a story we're telling ourselves. This I have 45, 50 years, as far as I'm concerned, to walk down that beautiful, no. The bridge stops exactly where you are, and who knows, the next step might be falling over. At least that was my experience October 17. There was no more bridge. The bridge that I thought was going to keep on being there, I almost fell off. But that's not talking doom and gloom. It's actually vayech. It's actually enlivening. Because what it's telling me is that I am the one building the bridge every step I take. Every day is the day where I build a little bit more underneath my feet so I can take the next step. And a little bit more so I can take the next step. So every day is about me putting together the next yard, the next foot, the next 10 yards of that bridge that I am constantly walking upon. So here's 2015. And if we are to enter mindfully into this year, we need to ask ourselves, what are the materials, the elements, the ingredients that I bring forth into my life with which I want to build the next yard? And I have to let go of my expectations of the bridge to look any way that I feel it should look, because I have no idea. Only thing that I have is that 1 yard in front of me, so that I can build something there and put my next foot. Go the next step. But I am asked to really mindfully look at what it is that I'm building this bridge with. What energies I pave the asphalt of the bridge I build, the bridge that is my life. So that I can say, step by step, contrary to Yaakov, Vayech, and I lived. Now maybe like Yaakov, my days will be few. Although I like to go to 147, that would be okay. But I have no control over that. All I can do is mind your next step. So that's what I wish us, all of us, on this 2015. we can together create, manifest the next yard of our life and take a powerful step forward and not backward.